Morning, guys. Ken at Tortoise Capital. It's the Saturday morning podcast for July 18th, 2020. I almost said the Saturday morning serials. You should listen to the Statler brothers. The greatest country music singing group ever. And the song is Class of 57. I was born in 1957, and everything in that song is something that resonates with me. And it's a song that my kids grew up listening to in the car on the way to soccer, and that we would sing together. And it was so the Statler brothers and those weekend morning drives, an hour to the practice, really matters. And the opening line in that is Saturday morning serials, chapters 1 through 15. And so they're talking about growing up with 5-cent movie matinees and going to the theater for 5 cents and watching all these serialized movies like Hercules and Samson and Perils of Pauline. And so it just is an itemized list of all the little snippets of their lives, and it's like listening to your cousins or your parents or your kids going through their scrapbook. And so that connects real strongly to me to the gratitude and forgiveness, which will be and testimony, which will be the theme for today. So yeah, I should be the last one, Jim, to chastise people on using spell check. And I'm selectively dyslexic with the word strategy, which is troublesome because I'm a strategist. And every time I'm typing fast in the moment, I spell it startagy. In fact, this is so common that it's actually a checkpoint with some of my friends. And another one is the word attached. I invariably spell it ATATCHED. So a typical email for me will be, I have something that I really want to share, so I tell somebody about it. I tell them about a new strategy, and I see attached, and both of those words are invariably spelled wrong. Even when I stop and think about it, 90% of the time, I get it wrong. And so I have to double scoop my extra focus. I have to turn up the laser 2 notches in order to make sure that I get it. So I'm going to tell a little military anecdote here. It's called Set Headspace and Timing. Setting headspace and timing on the 50 caliber machine gun. So the 50 caliber machine gun that the Army uses now was designed by Mr. Browning for the American Expeditionary Force in World War I. So that thing is over 120 years old, the design of that thing. It is the epitome of brute force and ignorance. So there's a task that every infantryman must master, and that is setting the headspace and timing on a 50 caliber machine gun, our most powerful anti-vehicular weapon in the light infantry. It's the heaviest gun that humans can even carry. I mean, we have bigger guns, but the light infantry can't carry them. But a 50 caliber machine gun, humans can carry for short distances. And it takes a team to do it, and you have to break it into pieces and then quickly reassemble it and then put it into operation. So setting headspace and timing means the following. In the 50 caliber machine gun, you have a block assembly like this, and inside this block you have ammunition that's on a belt that feeds into a slot, and then you have a bolt that actuates, that goes back and forth, and when you pull the trigger, that bolt comes forward, and on the end of the bolt is the firing pin, which hits the back of the round, creates a spark, and that sends the bullet down the barrel. Well, in this end of the block, there's a big hole. And when you transport the gun, you disassemble it.
Hey, dear, I'm heading out the girls.
All right.
We got the donation bag. All the dogs are in, okay?
All right. Love you, dear.
Love you too.
So when you disassemble this thing, to move it and to store it, you have to unscrew the barrel. It's a one-man lift to carry that barrel. In fact, we use the 50 caliber machine gun barrel for physical training because it's so heavy, it acts like a heavy bar. And now you can move that thing up and down. And then it takes, one guy can carry the block, one guy carries the barrel, another guy carries the tripod that this thing sets on. Each one of those things is a full load. Well, when you unscrew that barrel, you have unseated it from the block assembly. And because there is a small explosion that goes on inside here, you want to make sure that you screw it in just the right distance so that this thing will operate. And so at the end of this thing, there are a certain number of, there's a gear that it hooks into, and there are slots in it. And when you screw that barrel in, it makes a clicking sound so that you know that it is locked in and seated. So as you slide it in, now the way you put this into operation, this is how smart these guys are. One of the things that you worry about is the enemy using your captured equipment. So the way this thing is designed is, it's set correctly. Setting headspace is the distance between the end of the barrel when it screws in and the seated assembly in this gear. And so you measure this distance. So you have a go, no-go gauge, which is like a little piece of metal that's the size of your thumb, and the machine gunner wears that around his neck on a chain. That's the headspace gauge. So when you and then timing has to do with where inside this gear also that it's set. So you check two things. When you assemble this thing, you put the barrel in, you screw it into the right until it runs up to the end and gets metal to metal contact. Then you back it off 1-2 clicks. And those 2 clicks are set so that the space between the front end of the bolt and the edge of the barrel is correct, so that when the firing pin comes forward, it will actually hit the back of the round. If it's not in far enough, the firing pin, when you pull the trigger, will come forward, but it won't hit the round. It doesn't make contact, and it won't trigger the explosion, which sends the bullet down the barrel. If you bring it in too close, then the ammunition won't feed correctly, and because there's not enough space for it to fit in there. Because when you fire that, the gas that's created by the explosion pushes the bolt back, which creates room for the next round to come in. And then when you pull the trigger, that bolt and pin comes forward, and then you get this cyclic automatic rate of fire that as long as you hold the triggers, then this will automatically fire. That's why it's an automatic weapon. Now, setting headspace and timing means that you have properly prepared the gun to fire by screwing in the barrel all the way to the right till it stops, and then backing off 2 clicks. Then you use your headspace and timing gauge to check the distance, and it has a go and a no-go end. If it's a go, the go end should fit into the space, and the no-go won't fit into the space. It means that you haven't gone too far. And so setting the headspace and timing means you screw it in, you back it off 2 clicks, and you check it with the headspace and timing gauge. Now, that gun is designed in that way so that if you put it in all the way to the right as far as it'll go, it won't shoot. And so that gun is designed so that if the enemy captures that machine gun, which will happen, if they don't know that, that gun won't work, and that gun and your gun or your buddy's gun, which was captured, won't kill you. So we have a saying, hey buddy, if you have a problem, and we call it, operator error, we think it's something inside you, hey, go check your headspace and timing. Have you checked your own headspace and timing? And where's your gauge? And when was the last time it was calibrated? Because that little gauge is a piece of metal, and it actually can be deformed through use and heat. And so one of the things that machine gunner does is he always knows where his headspace and timing gauge is, and he always knows that it's calibrated because he checked it against a standard, which is kept in a pristine condition. And so when all the machine gunners in the unit come in, they can compare it to the standard to see if this headspace and timing gauge is still good. And then they can go out into an infantry battalion, which might have 50 of those machine guns, and that one standard certifies the gauges, and then the gauge certifies the gun, and then the 50 guns are what stands between the forces of good and evil in the world. So part of this thing of the zero state, which is pretty key, zero state, and your gauge is connected to trading, because your trading system is how you get the business done. And that thing is a machine in some ways. You have rule sets, you have an operator, and that thing has to work in all kinds of markets, and you have to be trained on it, and you have to be in the zero state. And that system, the machine gun, has to work. So I want you to think now about the kata as a way to, we're going to disassemble and assemble our system. So disassemble and assembly is fundamental to being able to use that system of the 50 caliber machine gun, because you have to be able to transport it. It's too heavy for one guy to lift, and it's too big to store in its fully deployed mode. It's too awkward. So you have to break it into its 3 component parts, move it to where you're going to use it carefully, reassemble it, set headspace and timing, check with your calibrated go, no-go gauge, and then you're ready to put it into operation. So that means disassembly and assembly includes this key component about setting headspace and timing. And you have to be able to do that day and night, tired, being shot at, because you may have to switch barrels. Like when you shoot that thing a lot and the barrel gets too hot, you have to take this asbestos mitten and take the barrel out and replace it with the spare barrel, and then set headspace and timing and put it into operation while you and your crew's life depends on your ability to perform without error. So you can see there's a lot of redundancy built in, but the really hidden deep point of this thing is the idea about backing it off back 2 clicks. And that's a hat tip that we give to Mr. Browning, who invented that thing, who was mindful enough to say, you know what, there could come a time when bad things happen, and I don't want this gun being used against you. So it takes a considerable effort to teach guys how to do this when it's their gun. Now, if you think about the enemy soldier, he may be well trained on his weapon, but is he trained on your weapon? And does he have the go, no-go gauge? He does not. So there are layers and layers to risk management that that connect. So setting headspace and timing is one of them. So that's among infantrymen then, is if we're talking about training a new rifleman or whatever, and we see he's having a malfunction, we tell him, hey, check your headspace and timing. And that's sort of a way that we reinforce the importance of that, and it becomes, a shortcut to understanding what our job is. All this thing needs is a bigger eraser. That's what that really needs. So while I'm erasing, I was thinking, Robert Hartley, I think, did I see Robert in here today? I think Robert was in here. He sent me a little article worth reading, and it was from the Porter Stansberry guys and all that jazz. And it was quoting, among other things, references to movies and all that. But it talked about the phenomenon of all the Robin Hood traders, and the latest statistics from the trading brokers is that there are, in this week alone, there were 10,000 traders an hour, amateur traders, buying and selling Tesla. 10,000 traders an hour. That's the kind of market it is. And you listen to me talk about Jim Cramer's observation that big money wants to sell. So the kinds of moves that are out there, the kind of psychology that's in place, is these are transformational times. And you've got to take into account all of the things that are generating the waves. I was listening to a small cap becoming a mid cap biotech company whose stock had been going way, way up. And it was a thing to ask that CEO, hey, why do you think your stock is going up? Is it because that you are inventing some things that may help us deal with the COVID? Or is it because your stock symbol looks so close to Tesla that there's guys that think they're buying Tesla when they buy your stock? And the CEO actually had to answer that question because it was actually a thing. So in this kind of environment, all kinds of things are possible. And in the world of martial arts and boxing, we call that there's always a puncher's chance. A puncher's chance. So in boxing and martial arts, a puncher's chance represents just the fact that even the best trained champion who should win that fight every time against an amateur can still get knocked out by one lucky punch. And so a puncher's chance is what we refer to when we talk about, hey, if you're in that fight, don't give up because there's always a puncher's chance. And then if you're the skilled participant, you're always concerned about that. So the best offense is a good defense. So if you look at a boxer like Floyd Mayweather, you can't hit him. And his cardio shape is so good that he lets you punch yourself out, and then he just takes you apart punch by punch. Regardless of what you think about him as a person, and I don't think anything about him as a person. I only think about him as a boxer. And I watch how he is a master of psychology to become the most highly paid boxer in the world. And he's had 50 fights, and you can't hit him. So he takes away the puncher's chance. When he fought Conor McGregor, the Irish showman, Conor McGregor had a puncher's chance. And Mayweather's artistry was such that he made it look like he had a chance in order to sell the next fight. McGregor had no chance against him because Mayweather is the greatest defensive boxer maybe in the history of the sport. So a puncher's chance is how you think about protecting yourself against the amateur. So all these guys that are out there whining and complaining about these guys making millions as day traders with no skill, they're getting hit by a puncher. So I don't care what the punchers are doing. I hope they continue to be successful because that brings more amateurs into the field, which creates volatility, which becomes predictable because they're herd animals. And that sets up our patterns very nicely as long as we can remember what it is that we're trying to do, make bricks every day, and go to the market and bring home just what we can carry, or go to the well and bring home a bucket full of water that we can carry, or tie ourselves safely to the tree and lower our bucket down into the river without falling in and draw our water from the stream. We're not going to get hit by a puncher's chance. The idea behind the execution size risk versus the position sizing risk is to make sure that even if we do get hit, we can take the punch. Can you take a punch? And that is, if you're going into a boxing ring, you're going to get hit. So you have to train to take a punch. You can't let your plan be so complex and fragile that the first time you get hit, you forget what you're doing, or it throws you off your game, or you no longer trust your complicated plans. So for us, the KISS principle of keep it simple, stupid. There's a certain beauty in simplicity and robustness. Robustness allows your system to survive contact. And the sage philosopher Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until they get hit in the mouth. Maybe it was hit in the face. Hit in the face. If you've ever been hit in the nose and had it broke, you know how that will change your mind. So we're going to favor systems that are anti-fragile. So Nick Taleb talks about that. Anti-fragile. And then Mike Tyson. Everybody has a plan until they get hit in the face. So that's the reason that I emphasize the 2R battle drill so much, is because the 2R battle drill represents the friction that you encounter in typical trades. And so the 2R battle drill helps you to engage with a challenging decision about how to manage that exit as you come into what should be your most favorable, happiest moment. And that is, how do you make that final docking decision and get it set? How do you set your headspace and timing for that exit? Think about the space shuttle and what it takes in terms of brute force and power to lift that thing off the ground. But that thing has to be engineered to such a tolerance that when the space capsule comes into the space station for docking, that thing is precise enough that in a zero gravity environment, that the mass of this thing doesn't destroy the space station. So the engineering precision and the fine tuning so that that final docking can come in and set an airtight seal, because you only have the air that you carried with you. There's no margin for error on that one. And yet, at the moment of liftoff, and you take a look at how much power that thing had to be able to lift all that mass, think about the scale of engineering at the macro level and the micro level. And that's what system engineering will do for you. That thing is as precise as it needs to be because of the market that it's in. That system has to be engineered to be able to operate in that market. And then you have to train those astronauts to be able to operate the system in that market. So you should probably watch Apollo 13 to understand the movie Apollo 13, to understand what mental toughness really means and what engineering specifications really mean and what doing your job really means under pressure, under stress, and the commitment that it takes to see it through to the last millimeter. You got to be correct here, and you got to be correct here, or lives are lost, and space is no longer even possible. So that's the span between like strategy and tactics, and large scale and small scale. So be able to take a punch. So we got to have the mental toughness and discipline. So if you think about mental toughness, that's like the resilience that it takes to just keep going in the face of adversity. Thick skin. emotional resilience. And then I want to compare that to discipline. Those aren't the same things. And training. So those three things are related. Mental toughness is the fortitude to keep going through pain, to be able to endure. You got to learn how to suffer. What's the point of failing if you don't learn how to suffer? That's the whole point of failing. It gives you the opportunity to learn how to suffer. And if you can learn how to suffer properly, then you can endure and keep going when others cannot. So discipline is the habit of mind and the will to be willing ahead of time, because we're humans and we can look ahead to that next moment in the future, and we know that in that moment there's going to be pain, and we haven't gotten there yet. We haven't walked that path to get there, but I know if I go down this path, there's going to be pain and suffering in there, and I can see that with my mind's eye. I know that that's coming out in the future. There will be pain. Discipline is that motivation. It takes the motivation for wanting the end state. Why do we want to go into that future and endure the pain? Because what happens after that, the consequences, is something that we value, and that the pain and the value that we get makes the pain and suffering worth it. That there's value. That the gain has greater value than the cost of the pain. So what can we do to ensure that this virtuous circle really works? How can we learn to suffer? Well, you don't want to learn to suffer just for the sake of suffering and learning. It's why? Because the thing that we're going to gain has value. It has real value. It is connected to who we are as people. That when we look at our heart and what we stand for, it's connected to that thing that we value. And so when we use the knowledge of our head about how to do those things and get with the rational side, the brain isn't the one that's really feeling all that suffering and pain. And your gut is worried about all of that potential. Hey, your gut's telling you, that's really going to hurt. I don't like pain. And your heart has to say, yeah, but the consequences of enduring are so great that it's connected at the values level, that it's worth suffering to pay the price in order to earn the gain. And so the knowledge of the hands is how to do that. The knowledge of the head is how to think about it and how to come up with a good plan to increase the probability that you're going to be successful and to do it well. And then the knowledge of the feet is how to walk that path every day, enduring all of the little things that go along with the big thing. So learning to suffer has to be connected to this moral and personal and social calculus that you go through to value, yeah, it's worth it. It's worth it to put up with this. And so now discipline is the recognition that this formula is true and correct, and you know that. And then that's your willpower to say, yeah, I'm committed to that, and I'm going to do the things that I have to do in order to solve this equation and get to the end of that. And that's why each day I get up and I do all those little things, knowing that there's pain and suffering. And guess what? It's not 100% that that's going to work. There's only some probability that you'll gain that success on the next transaction or whatever. And so the whole Stoic philosophy and the Buddhist philosophy, right action, right thought, right action, in pursuit of things that are genuinely worthwhile, don't cause needless suffering. Stoics would say you can only manage your response to what the results are. You can't control the results, you can contribute to it. But Stoicism is about learning how to suffer and then choosing the path intentionally and then going through fire to achieve what must be done. When you do that as the walking man, periodically you come to these roundabouts from whatever direction. And in that roundabout, you are resting, recovering, recuperating, regenerating, repurposing, resetting, recommitting, and you are relating those stories about what your journey was like between these different paths on the roundabout. And you are joined by other people that came to this roundabout while you came to that roundabout. And in that exchange of stories, we are slowly ratcheting our performance up and locking it in. So what do I mean by locking it in? I mean that once you learn that lesson, lock it in. Do the things that it takes to raise your level so that your performance is better. And sometimes that means you need to lock it into an SOP or a flashcard or a process or a checklist or a job aid, whatever it's going to take in order for you to be able to do standard work. Standard work. That's just how we do it. And so in the world of the craftsman, standard work is recognition of genuinely what it takes to do the hard work that makes progress possible. I'm not even so concerned about how much each little positive step up is. What I'm tracking, the thing that matters in the long run, is when you connect the lower dots. Why didn't that take? I was trying to get my red dot. There we go. So what does the shape of your losses look like? And what's when you connect those dots up in here, and then you get some kind of you can get some kind of median, I suppose. We can now say, what is the when you start thin slicing this in time, what's the distance in here? How tightly constrained is this production system? The tighter and smoother that curve is, the more this looks like a process that is in control and manageable. You cannot manage a process that is out of control. We need stable systems. Systems that are in control, so that we can then identify the variables that contribute to change and oscillation. And we can, so if I have 5 steps in the process, And that process is in control because it has very tight tolerances, the kind of tolerances that make machine guns work and space stations work and life works. If I have a process that's in control, I can take a look at, well, what happens if I change this variable? What does that do to the way my performance goes? And then what about that one? And there may be 3 or 4 different settings on this. And then I can start varying the individual components of the system and to see what the net effect is on my performance. And in that way, I can continue to ratchet up. Continuous improvement using craft knowledge. That's painful. That takes discipline and willpower. But the energy that it takes, where does the energy come from? It comes from thinking about the gains that are along the way, the things that you learned along the way that were satisfying and give you energy. Every time you do it right, you're adding to your storage of energy, which says, yeah, I know that I can do it right because I've done it right. That's what kata does for you. It gives you the confidence and the evidence that you know that you can do it right because you've done it right and you have evidence of it. So the rules of the kata simply have to be understandable and followable. It turns out that our katas are good enough that that is going to lead you on the path towards continuous improvement. But the reason I standardize the kata is so that there is one common benchmark, one standard gauge against which to measure your ability to comply with a set of rules. And if you can do that here in the kata and then modify the rules as we learn, each little step along the way, even though there's pain and suffering, is going to lead you to the kinds of results that you want. So then the stories that you tell about what it is like to be you when you come into the roundabout is what helps inspire others that are going through exactly the same issues. Like there's not a whole bunch of new issues that we're inventing every day that we got to contend with. When was the last time there was a new genuine problem as opposed to the same old problem coming at you again in waves? Well, that's just sort of given. That's just the way it's going to be. Most of the time, those things will defeat herd animals. And that's why those problems persist. They're the kinds of problems that a herd animal is willing to let defeat them. So how do you defeat those things? Discipline, willpower, training, mental toughness, learning how to suffer. That's just part of the job. If you're going to be a wood carver, you're going to get splinters, so you better not be surprised when it happens and know how to treat them. And your thin skin will become thicker over time. There's the fire coming out of the rocket. And there's our space station. And there's our docking maneuver. Look at the fine motor skills those guys have to do to be able to bring that thing into completion. That's a lot harder than what we're doing, and that all we got to do is have a fireman who takes care of the chimp, hands it off to a manager who may or may not invoke a sniper, and then the caretaker takes care of those guys, lather, rinse, and repeat. That's all we got to do. Compare that to the guys who are flying the dang rockets up to the space station. But it's the same thing. Mental toughness, discipline, and training. And then the energy comes from the fact that you know that what you value and what you're aiming for ultimately is worth it. If not for you, then for others. And if you're living your life in service to others so that the people may thrive, then there's no limit to what you're willing to endure on behalf of the people. That's actually easy. So that's what we mean by alignment. So you got to be aligned in everything that you do, and then don't engage in useless activities. You know, that's our our other hero, Musashi. Don't engage in useless activities. So that's the secret of the kata. It's not even a secret, but it kind of is. It's a secret if you forgot it. And then when you hear it again, oh yeah, that's right, the kata. So when you think about performing kata, there's a reason why you get set and you lock in your mind, you lock it in so that you're ready to begin, and you bow and then you demonstrate the kata. That little moment just before you take the first step is the end result of discipline, will, and training and preparation, and then in the moment when you decide to commit. That decision is sacred. So that was the nature of the lesson yesterday about use rigorous loving kindness with yourself. In a battle for what's really important, you wouldn't tell somebody else just your first thought, your first inclination. No, what you would tell them to do is to do the things that you know you've done your due diligence on, and that it's going to give you your best chance to survive and thrive in the world. That's what you would do for others. So do that for yourself. Don't do less for yourself than you would do for others. And why is that important? Because if you don't thrive, you can't help other people thrive. So commit to the sense of duty to serve others, and then serve yourself so that you can serve others. You got to do the training, and you got to be preparing yourself so that you can serve others. If you're committed to serving others, you won't be trivial or take shortcuts in your own training, because then you're not going to be able, that's not serving others well. That's being selfish. So don't do that. So the power of this roundabout to get things done and to share and exchange these ideas. Those things matter. So set your headspace and timing right. So I want to read to you Jerome's monthly check-in. I'm sure that I recorded that last session. Man. Where did that hour go? So I've uploaded this in the takeaway, and you ought to, man, you know what I ought to do is I ought to have Rick Wise laser engrave this on a wooden plate. So I'm just going to read this verbatim, and then you might be, maybe I'll just turn that into a audio tape, and it says, and I'm going to read this in Jerome Gonzalez's voice. So let me tell you the story of Jerome. So he came to one of our, actually two of our research weekends and live tradings. He's a professional trader in the Philippines, and he came here, I guess, in 2010 or 2011. Started getting the daily and weekly newsletters, and has slowly been improving his trading practice, and then rejoined in an active way the Patreon distribution, and then took the hybrid workshop and has been doing the due diligence. And I hear from him in a one-page email once a month. And those of you who've been here for a while have seen his other check-ins before. Maybe I'll put those in a nice bundle. But here's his July check-in. In the time of the virus, in the Philippines. Dear Ken, it's been 10 months since I restarted my journey with you in Patreon. If I remember correctly, I'm one of your early gold subscribers. So yeah, this was back around 2010. I've been receiving your lessons for free through the old Yahoo group for years, and I reckoned it was time to pay my dues. and my investment has returned 100-fold. I was able to incorporate your systems and methods into my own beliefs and my preferred way of trading. Perfect. The daily nuggets you impart, especially the master classes, the coffee talks, the moments of Zen, enabled me to fine-tune little by little the way I trade. And now I primarily use hybrid trades or swing trades, initiated by using your day trading techniques. That's hybrid trading in a nutshell right there, and how to do it. In the past, now he's been trading for 30 years. In the past, my results were erratic. I performed at pace with the benchmark, but my equity curve was not consistent. This year, using the risk Z, market classification, the slope of the RL90, and listening to your daily strategy podcasts kept me from harm's way, and it signaled when it was time to put risk back in the market. I managed my exits better by dialing down my swing trading to 30 minutes instead of daily charts. I noted your advice to think of those swing positions as gates on hinges, so that I can be mindful that they can swing as fast and sometimes faster to erase all the gains. Think of those old swinging doors that were connected by powerful springs. You would push it open to walk through, and that spring would snap it shut faster than you opened it. So if you were the second person going through, you better watch for that swinging gate to come hit you. My uncles used to think that was funny when we'd go to visit Grandpa. In mid-June, I concentrated back to day trading as the risk Z went below zero. When the risk Z turned back up, in the winter went to spring, some of my swing positions went much higher, but without me. Before, these missed trades affected me much, and hence my key takeaway this month is gratitude and forgiveness. While I missed some huge swings, I am grateful that I experienced my best month purely day trading. My best day earned 67R, trading Tesla to the downside, capturing the move from 1750 to 1500. I'll say that again. My best day earned 67R, position sizing R, trading Tesla to the downside, capturing the move from 1750 to 1500. I improved my day trade consistency and limited my max equity drawdown to just 1% in the past month. My best day earned 67R trading Tesla to the downside, and I improved my day trade consistency, limiting my maximum equity drawdown to just 1% the past month. I forgive myself for mistakes, knowing that the opportunities will always be there. I was unable to record my R histogram this past couple of months, but I do review and mark up my trades to see where I can improve. He's trading so much that making each and every chart is not feasible. I trust that the R's will continue to come if I consistently and properly apply my process and trading plan. This goes back to your plan, prepare, execute, and assess process, and below are my results. That's a system, that is a process that is under control. So his year to date is 56% this year. 1 year, 65, trailing 12 months, 65%. 3 years, 15%. 5 years, 15.8%. So he was doing pretty good even before he rejoined the Patreon. But he'd been working this stuff for 10 years with us, to be honest. In the same period of time, year to date, the S&P is flat, the EAFE is minus 7.6, and the Russell 2000 is down 11. Just enjoy that little moment of zen. I've provided this document to you in the handout. If you don't print that and put it in laminated plastic and put that right next to your screen and read that every day, I don't know what else I can tell you to do. But that one page. So thanks very much to Jerome and what he does. Trying to find my little bamboo thing here. Oh man, don't tell me I lost that. That better not have closed or I'm going to be really upset. I'll just have to replay it. Damn it. I guess when I shrunk it, it made that disappear. Well, we'll get a screenshot of that. I was going to take that moment to reinforce the lessons from the first hour to Jerome's testimony. The 2-hour battle drill, going to work every day, get your system under control, make haste slowly, gratitude, forgiveness, testimony, mental toughness, discipline. Oh, the good news is that I don't have to, it wasn't like I just invented any of that stuff. People have only been talking about that for 3,000 years, and all I'm doing is talking about it. So Sam asked some questions today. So these were the, I only got 2 questions from you guys this week. So I had to fill that first hour with something. If there was a moment of Zen in there for you, tell somebody. Let me know what you think about it. Sam asks, if I'm trading an SSC pattern and an SFC pattern comes up while I'm still in that trade, should I take it in parallel or ignore it? So he's referring specifically to the kata rules. So here's my answer. Let's think about what he's asking. So if I'm trading an SSC pattern and an SFC comes up, I'm going to do what I always do just to make sure that I think about this correctly, and I'm going to draw a picture. So we're in an SSC pattern, and this comes back to, and I'm just going to go ahead and answer the second question at the same time. He said, hey, the second question was, when I enter the SSC trade immediately, or I enter the SSC trade immediately once all three criteria are met, and I don't wait for a new 1 bar high. Please confirm this approach is fine. Well, there's really 4 criteria. What he didn't remember was, hey, don't forget the harsh winter. So the main point on this one is the idea that there is a sight picture. When you look through your sight picture, so in basic rifle marksmanship, the sight picture is what you see, you know, when you look through your little rifle and you have a little sight on the end and you're looking at a target. When you come back around this end and look through the sights, you're trying to align your sights, pointing the rear sight and the front sight to the center of the bullseye. And then you put your eyeball over here, and now those 3 points, when they are all in alignment, and by the way, this is no different. The rifle is your system. The target is your goal in the market. It's the opportunity in the market. So this whole environment is the market, and then that's your specific target. And then there's yourself. Self, system, market, looking for alignment. That's no different than setting headspace and timing on a 50 caliber machine gun, which is a crew serve weapon, meaning there's a team of guys. But your individual rifle, you're trying to get a good sight picture. So there's 4 things you got to do. Steady position, so that you're not wobbling and introducing variables. You don't want variables to come in and shake this up to make this rifle wobble. So the first thing is a steady position. The next one is a sight picture. And that means your eye, the rear sight post, and the front sight post are all lined up with correct aiming on a calibrated system. And then you want breath control, because the rising and falling of your diaphragm will cause your breathing patterns will cause this thing to wobble. So you take a deep breath, you let it out, and then there's about 2 seconds before you feel an urge to breathe. That's called the natural respiratory pause. In that moment, your body is completely still, and then exerting steady rearward pressure with your trigger finger. You squeeze the trigger. You don't jerk the trigger. Steady rearward pressure, trigger squeeze. Those are the 4 principles of basic rifle marksmanship. If you do those 4 things, and if your rifle is zeroed, in other words, you've calibrated that rifle, that bullet will go exactly where the rifle was aiming, and you aimed that rifle. So those 4 principles right there are how you get that system under control, and you get repeatable results with a tight shot group, and that means you hit what you aim. So the sight picture is what we're looking for. So in the SSC, the first thing that we're looking for 4 things to have occurred. The first thing had to have been a harsh winter. The harsh winter is what creates the opportunity to get back to something like fair value. There's a good chance that this thing was incorrect. They moved it too far away from fair value. And when enough people realize that, they see that fair value up here and they say, oh, I can buy this quality thing on sale. They start coming in at some point, and that changes this winter. And remember, there was a little baby dragon following that RL10. I just noticed I'd use maroon instead of red. So that RL10 in the winter no longer continues to fail because the buyers came in. And then that crosses the baby dragon, and that's the early warning alert that that winter has now become spring. Just so you can see that's yellow in the middle. That dragon was tracking down here too. And if this thing really does go back up to fair value, eventually that dragon is going to go back up. That's awesome. The other thing that was happening was that there was a PSAR tracking down here. And at some point, that baby dragon gets crossed over. It warns us that that winter is going to become spring, that the RL10 spring here is going to cross that dragon, and that the PSAR is going to flip. When all four of those things have happened, you had a harsh winter. You had winter became spring right here. The RL10 crosses the dragon, number 3. And number 4, the PSAR flipped. When all four of those things happen, you just buy it. That PSAR flip happens on a close. And so you're buying the open of the bar, and hopefully it goes up. But when that bar closed, then the PSAR flipped, then you're buying as soon as you can after that PSAR flip. We have said, now there's a refinement that says, hey, I want to see a universal entry. I want to see the bar where it closed. I want to see it take out the high of that bar. That's a refinement. I'm not requiring that for the kata. I just want you to buy it. But I want you to think about that as a refinement. The other refinement I want you to think about is that when you see 1 and 2 and 3 getting ready to happen, you start putting these trailing stop entries so that when the PSAR flips, and if this thing takes out, you get the PSAR dot -1, and you just buy it. And that way, if that thing takes off. Now, those two refinements about waiting for a higher high or using a PSAR trail, those are not part of the kata. Those are part of some experimental systems that people are adapting to do even better. Now, this is all, the kata is on 1 minute charts. But if you're Jerome and you're trading a 30-minute and you want this, that little PSAR entry is fine. Like, you may not want to wait 30 minutes for this bar to fully form and all that other stuff. That, as you start getting out into longer and longer time frames, you're going to discover that that PSAR trailing stop is going to be even better. That's just a hint. And that's what Worth and Glenn Osborne are studying for their presentation in the Research Weekend virtual conference this year. For purposes of the kata, which is on 1 minute charts, all I want you to do is wait for that bar to close, let the final piece of the puzzle fit, and then in your sight picture, you should be able to see 4 things. The first one is the harsh winter. Don't forget the harsh winter, which I say in answer to Sam's second question is, which is the most important feature of the pattern, because it's the one that creates the opportunity for the rebound. There's, Jim, that's me misspelling. The PSAR flip is usually the last thing to occur, and it happens when the bar closes. For the kata, wait for that to occur, and then if all 4 things have happened in the sight picture, then just enter. For adapting you to your own rule set after the kata is complete, then you can think about our current experiment, about using the trailing PSAR as a way to try to squeeze more gains from the entry. Or you could think about the little wait to see a higher high and then set that as a mechanical entry. That's not a bad idea, but that adds extra complexity to the kata, and I want you to experience that and see why the kata is not the perfect rule set. The kata only has to be a clear rule set for it to have kata value. Now that we've seen the second question, we can now come back to Sam's first question. If I'm trading an SSC pattern, which you just saw, and then an SFC pattern comes up while I'm still in the trade, should I take it in parallel? No, because then you would be at net zero. Or should I ignore it? No, ignore it. Because in the kata, you have a defined exit system. And you stay in that trade until the mechanical rules of the kata tell you to get out of that trade. In your personal system, you've just identified a very important research question that you've got to resolve so that you can be very clear on what your trade's going to be, your trading system. So now let's take a look at a couple variations on that. And we'll call that C001 just for the heck of it. So this is why I am making a big deal of this. The harsh winter. The context matters. I just got done saying that the most important part of that SSC, the 4 criteria, was the harsh winter. The harsh winter, which then ends up reversing, is what creates the opportunity that attracts the buyers. The buyers see this from here to here and say, oh, there's fair value. I want some of that on sale. And then that comes in, and then all these guys that were short now have to contend with this buying pressure. And when the selling pressure is equalized with the buying pressure, you get sideways action. And that's what happens in here. If there's enough buying pressure and that thing crosses the baby dragon, now you have sort of an initial alert. And then we know that when the PSAR does finally flip over here, that first little PSAR dot is going to look like this, and then off we go. And so our stop is going to be this from wherever we got our entry. I don't even care where the entry is. Whatever our entry was, it's going to be in that region somewhere. Wherever that entry is, in the kata, we're just using the PSAR. In Wu Wei, effortless action, effortless action. That's the symbol. Not very well done, but eh. In the Wu Wei exit, this stays in place until we see the PSAR has given us some little value there. No lose plus dinner for 2. Take a sniper move to lock in. I now have locked in those gains. And then somewhere up in here, when I'm like plus 0.6 position sizing R, or 1, 2, 3, somewhere in here, I'm thinking about, man, I got to get my sniper. Is it time for my sniper? Because this little 1, 2, 3 on a next higher time frame is bump number 1. And because there was such a huge sell-off that motivates all of these guys, they will see that gain back up to here as an opportunity to get short on a dip. So the very success that you have on this rebound is what triggered a bunch of these guys to come in and short it. So when it gets back to that price level, you're attracting the sharks. That's an area in which there was a very successful short. Look how that harsh winter. So all of these guys want to short it again in the same way that when it moved down to here, you activated a bunch of new buyers to come in. A bunch of new buyers came in. So what does that make this? That makes this a trading range and a channel. So the very success that you have that comes in around about 0.6 R, which is 1, 2, 3 of these initial risks, is what alerting these guys, hey, there's blood in the water. So this is why you might want to activate a sniper, because so many times it gets this far and then starts to fail again, and you start seeing this kind of pattern. And then we get these solid levels of resistance. And then if the resistance is getting lower, now we're interested in those supported winter crossings or collapsing dragons and all of that jazz. Now, notice the only part of this thing that I haven't even talked about yet. It's the part that matters the least. It's the entry. All of this other stuff is standard work. And it's the trade frame, the structure of the play. Haven't even talked about the entry yet. It's the part that matters the least. You know you're going to enter somewhere. You know you're going to enter somewhere. And you know what your risk is going to be, and you know what your reward aiming point is. You know where your exit point is. And so now you can sort of see, yeah, I've got these layers of gains up here, so I don't have to worry about that too much. The fact that it was a harsh winter tells you that you have a tradable gain to the upside. But just know that when you get back up there, that's a call to more sharks. And you're just hoping that the buyers have enough strength to come in and take it back to whatever fair value is. So wherever fair value ends up is simply the net result between the sellers and the buyers. And you're just trading in this area with effortless action. So now when that dragon comes down, and this thing turns, whoops, too big. And now you're in this trade. The kata tells you how long you're supposed to be in that trade. The kata says, follow the PSAR until it exits, or until the Bollinger Band mean comes in. So the Bollinger Band mean comes in here and then starts moving up. And then your kata exit, your kata says, follow the PSAR till it hits the Bollinger Band mean, then follow the Bollinger Band mean up. But it also says, if you get 3 of these boxes in, you can choose to take half the position with the sniper and half with the Bollinger Band mean. That way you get practice in the kata of using the sniper decision. You're learning how to train the sniper feelings and train the manager's feelings in this kata. Once you perform the kata enough and you've got enough confidence in your sniper, Then you can shift the kata rules to your own system where you use the Wu Wei, then make a sniper exit or a sniper move here to lock in no lose plus dinner for 2, and then pick up the Bollinger Band mean, and then you decide where you want to start engaging with the sniper. So the answer to your question is connected to what the kata is supposed to be teaching us. So for the kata and the kata alone, if I'm trading the SSC pattern and then an SFC occurs, let's see how do you get an SFC pattern out of this? Well, the dragon ends up coming up here. And I'm going to draw price here as this dark blue, just so we can see it easily. At some point, you got your entry in here somewhere, wherever it was. And now it's moving up. And then crosses. So here is an SFC, and now your PSAR dots were probably like this, right? And then your Bollinger Band mean was here. So you get an SSC, but before it hit the exit, whether it was the PSAR or it was that Bollinger Band mean. So your real question is, what do I do in this region where I have an RLXD, but it hasn't hit my other stop? In the kata, you don't do anything because it hasn't hit your mechanical stop yet, which is either the PSAR or the Bollinger Band mean. So you don't change the rules of the kata just because that happened. The kata is not over until that trade exits, and you're only going to do one thing with that trade until it exits, and that's manage it according to the rules. So don't take it in parallel. Ignore it. If you find yourself feeling an urge while you're performing the kata, just notice that and write it down in your trading journal, and then you will have learned to separate the manager versus the chimp. The chimp is the one who notices everything. Oh, there's an SSC, and maybe I should do something. What should I do? And should I do? Yeah. That's what the chimp sounds like. The manager just says, hey, quiet. Hey, fireman who got me to no lose plus dinner for 2, you were supposed to take that chimp and take him back to the firehouse so that I can just manage my business. That's what the manager has to do. And the firemen working together got to manage the chimp. So the way you manage that chimp is you take, the fireman says, let me teach you your letters. Come over here to the trading journal. And now, chimp, you tell me all about what you saw and what you felt and what you thought. And we're going to log it into the trading journal so that we can evaluate that later. Meanwhile, we've cleared the deck for the manager to just do his job, and that is manage the trade. And then at some point make a decision later on, should I activate my sniper or not? Let the manager do his job. Take the chimp and go teach him his letters and work in the trading journal and notice those things. You're going to use the accumulated evidence of all those little chimpanzee observations to decide on the basis of evidence, what should I do in this situation? So that's how you manage that chimpanzee, with the use of your fireman. Maybe you got to have a teacher in here. The fireman's going to be a teacher. So maybe add a teacher and a disciplinarian or a sensei. Oh, that's what sensei means, teacher. Have the teacher in there teaching them how to use that trading journal. I should say at this point, just to let you in on a secret. One of the things that happens with the kata is I think the Wu Wei exit is better than the kata's exit rules. But in the kata, which I published to the world, it says use the PSAR, and that's pretty good. But the Wu Wei is better. You only learn about the Wu Wei exit if you are suffering with the sound of my voice. So that's your payoff, Wu Wei. You know a better exit strategy than the one that's published to the world. The one I published to the world is good enough. But sometimes early in the move, this thing will start moving up. It'll come down and hit the PSAR and you're out, but it won't hit the Wu Wei. And then this thing will reverse and just keep going. The Wu Wei exit gives that thing room to breathe. And only when you're in the money does it move. So it's very simple and takes advantage of the fact that sometimes these moves come down before they go back up, but without hitting the initial stop. Okay? That's like backing off 2 clicks and setting your headspace and timing. That's what we just did there. I'm teaching you how to set headspace and timing on that SFC. So that's everything I want to cover today. And you should reflect upon this stuff. Use your trading journal, system, self, and market. You saw me use a modified Cornell note system sheet to work my way through all of those key concepts that emerged from the narrative. And you saw me taking notes about the story that came out of my own head, because I hadn't prepared that as a particular story, but those are story fragments that were floating around, and at various times I've told pieces of that, but it seemed like the right thing to do at the time. So as that story started emerging, as those observations about what I was saying registered with me, I was locking those in the key concepts portion of the trading journal and of that note-taking sheet. And then I made those connections over to system, self, and market as we went. So a lot of important things covered today. The most important one is Jerome's testimony. That's what it looks like on the other end of the tunnel when you come out of the darkness and into the light. And you'll notice that light getting brighter and brighter with each step that you take. And it takes discipline to keep going through the darkness. Trusting in your feet, one step at a time. From a steady base, you can test to see if that ground is firm in front of you. That's what your little walking stick is too. Is there ground in front of me to take the next step? There is. Proceed. Mental toughness is how you endure the expected, typical, normal, and even abnormal pains of that journey. Even when they surprise you, you remember, oh yeah, that's just pain. Pain is weakness leaving the body. And learning is painful. So learning is weakness leaving the body. Every time you learn something, it displaces some of that weakness, which is ignorance or uncertainty or lack of conviction or confidence or whatever. It comes from doing the work, developing a thick skin, getting on with it, learning to suffer, trusting in the process, one foot after another. Do not engage in useless activities. Keep your eyes on the prize. March or die. That's the motto of the French Foreign Legion. March or die. That's the world I grew up in. And that's the world that I trade in. Your world's going to be different, but some of these things may resonate with you, give you something to think about. You think about them in writing in your trading journal, and then you bring a disciplined mind to the story circle that you think twice, cut once. You measure with a micrometer. You mark it with a crayon, and you cut with an axe. So precision has its uses. Brute force and willpower and going for it at an acceptable level of detail. Think about the power that it takes to lift that rocket off the ground, the engineering that goes into that. You got to get that right. Lives depend on it. The rigorous loving kindness that you bring as an engineer to preparing that rocket so those brave guys sitting on top of that thing are going to come home safe. That's the level of due diligence that you bring to trading for those guys so that they may thrive and come home to their families. That's your sacred trust and obligation and duty. And if you'll do that for others, and you will, do that for yourself, rigorous loving kindness. Don't act on hunches. Note them, study them, learn from them. That's what the chimp is there for, just to give you early warning. The baby dragon is the same thing as the chimp on our screen. It just says, hey, just notice that usually after I get crossed, winter becomes spring. Price crosses the dragon. PSAR is going to flip. That's your sight picture. If that was a harsh enough winter, that could be a good trade. Just enter. Manage the trade. Activate the sniper so that the people may thrive. Take good care, guys. Have a great rest of this weekend. Stay safe out there. This is a marathon and not a sprint. Take good care of yourselves. We need you.